Tadparamparya vidmahi Jnanalingeshwaraya dhimahi Tanno Guruh Prachodayate Om. Om Yoga Maharishi Dr. Swami Geetananda Giri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Namaste, Swagatam, Bonjour, Buongiorno, Buonasera. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Ayubhovan, Ayushman Bhava, Kiyo Ora, Boredha, Huya More, Salamat Pagi, Shubh Dinam Suprapat. This Saturday, I thought we'll focus on one of the Yamas. We have already gone through the concepts of Ahimsa, Satya and Asteya. The fourth of the Yamas, according to Maharishi Patanjali, is Brahmacharya. And today, we'll attempt to look at Brahmacharya and see if we can get a different perspective on this much misunderstood, confusing Yama. Just to put it in its context again, the Yama, of which there are 5, the Pancha Yama, they are the internal tools for us to regulate our old primitive consciousness. So I'm just putting it back in the context. We need to regulate that primitive old consciousness whose only requirement is survival. And for the sake of survival, it will drive us to do anything and everything. So the Yama, of which there are 5, their purpose is as an internalized tool of choice where we go against the primitive conditioning and the primitive tendencies that are driving us based on survival instinct. What is survival instinct? Abhinivesha klesha, the desire to survive at any cost. So having said that, let us look at the term Brahmacharya. Brahma and Charya. The term Charya means to move, to live, to abide, to flow, to grow. So it has the implication of a dynamic ability to stick to the path. So Charya as a dynamic ability to stick to the path, and constantly you are growing. Constantly you are moving along the path. That is where the word Charya comes to be. So Charya can be understood as to live in tune with, to be attuned with, to be in harmony with. It is a state of continuous, constant growth and movement. So anything that is living is Chara. That which is non-living is Achara. Chara, Achara. So what do you mean by something that is living? It is constantly in the process of growth. There is a constant dynamic stickability to the path for which you have been born. So Charya implies not stagnation but growth. Not limitation but unlimitation or delimitation. This is where it is so important to understand the term if we are to understood what Patanjali has said. So chara or charya means to stick to the path, to live the path, to become the path, to maintain, sustain and retain the path. And towards what? Towards Brahman. Stickability, constant growth, dynamism, living the path towards Brahman itself. Now what is this Brahman? Brahman is the cosmos. Brahman is everything. Brahman is the supreme. Brahman is the source. Brahman is the cause. Brahman is that which is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. It is the supreme. So the supreme universe itself is Brahman. The source of the universe is also Brahman. And Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada, he tells us, Brahman Satyam Jagat Mithya. The only reality is Brahman. Brahman Satyam. The only Sat is Brahman. Jagat, which is the manifest universe, is Mithya, is illusionary and false. You remember Patanjali defines avidya, viparyaya as mithya jnanam. So we are caught up in this universe. We think this is real. We are under an illusion. Illusion, delusion. So the reality is Brahman. Everything but the Brahman is unreal. This is Adi Shankara's clear-cut teaching. Now here, you put these two words together. Brahman and Charya. So, Charya is the dynamism, stickability to the path, a constant growth and moving forward, higher, deeper, inner, on the journey towards what? Brahman. So, bringing these two terms together, we start to understand that Brahmacharya is our capacity, our capability to make a choice to move in tune with the Brahman itself. To stick to the path of knowing Brahman. It is said in the Upanishad, what is it by knowing which we will know everything? And that is called Brahmajnanam. When you understand the Brahman, you don't need anything else because everything will be known. Towards Kaivalya, Maharishi Patanjali says the same thing. He says, what is unknown is insignificant at that point. Because all is known. You have become Ishvara, Purusha, Brahman. And there is nothing you don't know because you have manifested omniscience. Omniscience means to know it all. Omniscience. And then you attain the highest state of power, omnipotent. And then you are everywhere, here, there and everywhere at the same time. Omnipresent. Om. No wonder Patanjali tells us, Tasya Vachakaha Pranavaha. When we are trying to understand the Brahman, when we want to know the source, when we want to know the causal force of everything, in which everything resides, we need stickability. We need to be on the path constantly 24/7. 24/7 we have to be on the path. Our mind should be focused on the path. Our efforts should be directed towards that path so that we will grow in the dynamic momentum towards Brahman itself. This is what Brahmacharya is. Because what happens? Abhinivesha kleshaha. You remember that villain of everything? Abhinivesha. Survival instinct. It is constantly trying to take you away from Brahman. It's constantly trying to take you away because it wants this false, mal-identified you to survive at any cost. Mal-identified you as a result of avidya, thinking I am me, asmita, having your likes and dislikes, raga, dvesha, and it says I have to survive this created entity. Nirmana chitta, the created entity, has to survive at any cost. Abhinivesha klesha. This is the brainstem that is constantly pushing us. Survive, 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 survive. And the brainstem and spinal cord are the most primitive part of our neuronal makeup. The neuronal makeup of the brainstem and spinal cord is only interested in survival at any cost. It doesn't care about anything else. It only wants to survive who? This false sense of you. That which is mithya. That is what Abhinivesha wants to do. It wants that false sense of you to survive at any cost. So it wants to make sure you don't know Brahman. Because if you know Brahman, Abhinivesha Klesha will lose the battle. It will lose the game. And it doesn't want to lose. It wants to win at any cost. Because it is driven by its own inherent capacity. Swarasavahi. It has its own inherent functioning system and backup. You know, when Goddess Durga, yesterday was Vijayadashami, when she keeps on cutting off the head of Mahishasura, from his blood spring more and more Mahishas. That is the Abhinivesha Klesha. Every time it is attacked, it comes back stronger and more devious. Like that virus in Matrix. Keeps on replicating faster and faster. The Abhinivesha Klesha is pulling us away, dragging us away from Brahman by saying you have to survive at any cost. Now if I am to survive, what do I need to do? I need to create a herd. Because strength lies in numbers as far as survival goes. Strength lies in numbers as far as survival goes. So make more of you. Replicate yourself. Replicate, reproduce what? You. And this is where we come into the division of the cells. The one cell, pluripotent cell. What happens? That pluripotent stem cell, it starts to divide and divide and divide and replicate by the process of mitosis and meiosis. Cell division. And what is the cell doing? Constantly dividing. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. The cells are constantly dividing. The somatic cells are constantly dividing and trying to create more and more and more and more of you, so that you have strength in numbers and you now feel very secure. I am going to survive. That is why the reproductive, creative, procreative instinct is pushed forth by the Abhinivesha Klesha to create more and more of you. If given a chance, clones. Remember Mahishasura replicating more and more Mahishas? Mahishasura doesn't replicate Durgas. They will only replicate themselves. Replicating again and again, more and more, so that I have more on my side. Look on my side. I have so much. The desire to procreate, to replicate, and for cells to divide is all driven by Abhinivesha Klesha. The more, the merrier, the more The numbers, the stronger we are, and we will survive. Who is the we? Me. It's not really a we, it's me. My type, my physical genetics, my thought patterns, my emotional patterns, my desires, my attachments, they must survive. So what is happening? Survival is driving us to create more and more and more and more, so that we feel assured and reassured and secured. But what we are securing is false. Jagat Mithya. We are creating more and more of the falsity that clouds more and more the luminosity of Sat. And all of it driven by the brainstem, all of it driven by the habitual tendencies of the samskara and vasanas. And even in that, look at the intricacy. Mitosis, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. But then what happens? You have to look at your sex chromosomes, which carry the genetic material from one generation to another generation. Imagine, you have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, 22 autosomes and 1 pair of sex chromosomes. Now, you have 46 chromosomes. Imagine your child at 92, and then what will happen? 184, 368. Imagine what will happen by the time you go into the 10th generation. There are so many chromosomes, your cells can do nothing. And so, what happened? Meiosis was created. Survival. Mitosis is fine for somatic cells. But then when you want to carry it, what do? You need another type. Create something else so that you make it haploid. So that all the father's chromosomes make it half. All the mothers make it half. Again, it's lottery. And then they come together. And what happens? You create the new you. Half from the mother, half from the father. And then you are there. My son, my daughter, my progeny, born of my genes. And these genetic samskaras and vasanas are transmitted from generation to generation. And today we understand even trauma is carried, transgenerational trauma. We are starting to understand. What are we doing? We are constantly moving away from the source, because evolution is driven by mutation. And we are constantly mutating and mutating and mutating away from the source. What is the source? Brahman. What is Brahman? Oneness. And we are moving from oneness into multiplicity. The one has become multiple. And this is driven by Abhinivesha Klesha. This is driven by Abhinivesha Klesha. And constantly the desire to create more and more and more and more and more and more. Well, if you want to go back home, sweet home, you have to make the opposite journey. You cannot have the journey of prasava. Prasava means birth, manifestation. You have to go the de-manifestation. And that is why you have to go on that involutionary journey back to the source. That going back to the source requires you to move in the opposite direction. Prati prasava. So prasava is the normal drive to procreate, replicate and move away from the source. And prati prasava is to go back. When you want to go back to the source, when you want to turn your compass around and you want to start going inner, deeper, higher, well, you need to go against this tendency to procreate, replicate. And what you start to realize is you have to go in. You have to go inward, not outward. And strength does not lie in numbers. You have to realize that strength lies when you go on that inner journey and become one. Because on that journey back towards oneness, when you are one, where is the fear? When you are one, there's no fear. It is only when two comes that fear comes, the fear of the unknown stranger. And Brahmacharya is the yama that enables us to realize we need to move from multiplicity to unitiveness. We need to move from diversity to unity. That moment of diversity to unity, that moment of divisiveness, that movement from divisiveness to unitiveness is the practice of Brahmacharya. Every time you are consciously making a choice, exercising that superpower of being human, the power of choice, you are deciding not to go into multiplicity, but to go back into that unitiveness. That journey and your adherence to the journey of going from many to one, from duality to non-duality, from Dvaitam to Advaitam. That journey is the journey of Brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is also understood as the first 27 years of our life. A period where we are to attune ourselves to the cosmic self and obtain knowledge, information that later on through experience can become wisdom and understand what is that Brahman itself. Because when you have set the stage in the first 27 years of your life, instead of getting caught up with the mundane and the multiplicity, you have tried to obtain the knowledge of the Brahman. Brahma Jnanam is the highest. Brahma Vidya is the highest. And you are trying to work towards that so that when you go into the second part of your life, Grahastha, and you become a householder with responsibility towards family and society, you can discharge your responsibilities without losing track of what is the ultimate goal, Brahman. But if in the first 27 years you have messed things up, you are going to get even more messed. Because once you become a householder, you get married and have kids and a job, God help you, because distractions are going to be much, much more. This is why the first 27 years, Brahmacharya was considered the time that your focus will be totally only the Brahman. And obtaining the tools, the knowledge, the information and the grace of the Guru, so that the rest of your life, when you go through Grahastha, householder stage, and then go into Vanaprastha, the retirement, and then Sannyasa, the letting go of it all, you have already set the stage. You have set the stage for that ultimate Brahma Jnanam to manifest. Along the way, this concept of attuning ourselves to the Brahman, removing ourselves from the distractions of the mundane, unreal world and focusing constantly on that which is real. This got worked and started to be defined as celibacy. It's tough to know when this happened, but I'll give you a few ideas. Our Vedic rishis, the Maharishis, the Sapta rishis, all of them were married, all of them had families, and today the modern Indian is a successor of the genetic makeup of all these rishis and rishikas. Now, if the rishis had practiced Brahmacharya as celibacy, we would not have a single person in India today. So the fact that anybody is there here today in India, tracing the ancestry back to the Gotra or Bharadwaja or whichever Kaushika Gotra or Bharadwaja Gotra or whatever you want to trace your lineage, those rishis were married, they had families, they had progeny. So Brahmacharya as celibacy was not a Vedic concept, for sure. come down the line, you find all the seers, all the masters were married, had families, and took care of society. Again, Brahmacharya has always been part of the culture, but people were married, they had children, so it wasn't about celibacy. Where did this come in? Well, Swamiji used to say, most probably this came in with Buddha. Because Buddha left behind his family and went into the world as a recluse for the sake of obtaining nirvana. And obtaining nirvana, the highest state of buddhi, he became the Buddha. But because of his coming away from family, Swamiji used to say this is maybe where this started, that Brahmacharya is celibacy. To be a Brahmachari, to be a sannyasin, to be a Swami, you had to be celibate. This movement may have had a major impetus from Buddha's own life. This was then strengthened by Adi Shankara. Because when Adi Shankara revitalized Hinduism in the 7th century, what happened is that at that time Buddhism and Jainism were at the peak in India. And the Buddhist and the Jain concept of Brahmacharya celibacy was very, very strong. It had overtaken all the old concepts. All the old concepts were taken up. And what happened is Adi Shankara said, I have to deal with this. Fight fire with fire. Use the same methodology to counter the pattern that was predominant in those days. And Adi Shankara systematized what today we call Dasa Nami, the 10 names of the different orders. The Saraswats, the Saraswati, for example, Satyananda Saraswati, Shivananda Saraswati, or the Tirthas, or the Giris, the Giri Dasanami, you find the Bharatis, as with Veda Bharati, Swamiji. So that Bharati, you find the Saraswati, you find the Giri, the Tirthas. These are all the 10 names of the orders that were created by Adi Shankara. And when he created this, again you must remember Adi Shankara, he never got married. As a child, he wanted sannyas, and he had to get the permission of his mother to become a sannyasin, and so the crocodile catches him, and he gets his permission from his mother, and then the crocodile leaves him. So that he brings in this concept of Brahmacharya as celibacy. So I would say that if you look at it, around the time of Buddha and then following that Adi Shankara, this is where the concept of Brahmacharya celibacy started to come in, and then it went to such an extent where today many of the orders, they will not, the Swamis of the order will not even be in the same room as a woman. And there are so many orders where they will refuse to be in the same place as a woman because they feel that even having a woman in the room is against Brahmacharya for them. Now, I respect their perspective, but for me, if you can not have a woman in the room because it disturbs your Brahmacharya is not Brahmacharya. I'm sorry about it. With all respect to so many of these monks, if having a woman in your room disturbs your Brahmacharya is built on shaky foundation. There's a beautiful story that exemplifies this. There were two monks walking along, and these monks were bound to celibacy and abstinence from thoughts of the opposite gender and all of this. Along the way, they had to cross a river, and there was a woman standing on one side, and she says, Swamiji, I'm not able to cross this river. There's no boat today. Can you help me cross? The senior monk is there, the junior monk is there. And the junior monk turns away. He says, I am not supposed to even look at a woman, let alone think of carrying you across the waters. And so he starts to move through the water and go to the other side. The senior monk, the wise one, he says, my dear mother. Many of them address the woman as a mother or as a sister. He says, Divine Mother, please climb on my back, I'll carry you across the river. And he carries her across the river, drops her on the other side. She touches his feet and says, thank you, Swamiji. She goes her way and the monks continue their way. Now this junior monk, he's like really upset. Here the senior monk, not only did he talk to a woman, not only did he look at her, he actually carried her on his back. And he's like, and they walk for 5 kilometers. And finally this junior monk just cannot control himself. He said, Swamiji, always, we have practiced Brahmacharya. We don't even think of the woman. We don't even want to be in their space. And look at you. You have carried that woman on your back. How dare you break Brahmacharya by doing this? The senior monk says, which woman? He says, the one you carried there 5 kilometers back. And the senior monk says, well, I put her off my back 5 kilometers away. Why are you still carrying her in your head for all this time? I love that story. Because we often associate the concept of Brahmacharya with this externalized, puritanical, patriarchal, sadomasochistic idea based on misogyny. Seriously, what a deviation from what Brahmacharya means, because it is the attunement, the alignment with the divine. Yes, Terry, that is exactly what Brahmacharya is. Where you do not see divisiveness, you do not see the difference between male and female. You do not see the difference between white and black. You do not see the difference between tall and short. You only see the oneness because you are focused on that oneness. Your journey from divisiveness to unitiveness has transcended the need to have many, and you have become one. When you can start to attune yourself, so whatever you do is an offering to the Brahman. Whatever you think is in tune with the Brahman. Whatever you say is in tune with the Brahman. And whatever you do is in tune with the Brahman. At that moment, you have become a living embodiment of Brahmacharya. And this is why we need to move away from this very limited, puritanical, misogynistic idea of Brahmacharya as celibacy. And then, yes, Mugs, I've seen that before. That the word was celebrate, not celebrate. There's a big difference between celibate and celebrate. We need to celebrate life. Now, this is not an excuse to go out and, be hedonistic. And that's not the idea here. The idea is you realize all of this mundane material world is unreal and you stop getting caught up with it. The sensual engagements, that is why another way to understand Brahmacharya is the transcendence of the sensuality. The sensual engagements that entrap us, you free yourself of sensory entrapping. You outgrow the sensory attachments. We have talked about this when we talk about Pratyahara. That is why Pratyahara and Brahmacharya have a lot in common. Because when you are working in Pratyahara, you are disengaging from all the sensual engagement that entraps you. You are moving from being a slave of the senses to a master of the senses. From Indriya Jala to Indriya Jaya. And this is why Brahmacharya is the pathway of choice, a choice-based pathway where we retain our focus towards the highest Brahman and attainment of Brahma Vidya and Brahma Jnanam. And this is why there's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita where everything you do is offered to the Brahman. Om Brahmarpanam Brahmavir Brahmagnao Brahmanahutam Brahmaivadena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhinam Hari Om Tat Sat Om. Everything is a Brahmarpanam. Your action is in Brahmarpanam. Into what? Into the Brahma. The Brahma offering into the Brahma everything for the sake of Brahman. What a beautiful concept of Brahmacharya. The concept of Brahmacharya is so beautifully brought out when you chant Om Brahmarpanam Brahmavir Brahmagnao Brahmanahudam Brahmaivadena Gantavyam Brahma Karma Samadhinam. That is the peak of Brahmacharya. Not saying I am celibate and then doing everything behind people's back. You know, this externalized restriction will always limit us. You know, the concept of growth is internalized, not an externalized. You cannot take a stick and say, grow, 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 grow. It has to come from spontaneity. That is why often as a teacher, you can teach people, but whether they learn or not is their choice. It's not the teacher's choice, it's the learner's choice. To learn is a choice. To grow is a choice. To be on the path is a choice. All of this is Brahmacharya. Where you're making a choice where everything you do in your life is for the sake of Brahman. Yajnavalkya tells Maitri, and Amma used to often quote this, love the husband for the sake of the divine manifesting through him. Love the wife for the sake of the divine manifesting through her. Love the child for the sake of the divine manifesting through the child. Love life for the sake of life that is a manifestation of the divine. You start to see, perceive and understand that Brahman percolating everything, because Brahman percolates everything. And when you realize that, how can you say that is Brahman, this is not Brahman? No duality. No duality. And when you start to realize that everything is Brahman, every moment of your life where you make a conscious decision and walk that path with steadfastness, you fast yourself, you fasten yourself in a steady manner, steadfastness. You fasten yourself in a steady manner to the path, so that you do not slip away from the path. You do not move away from that path which is described as a razor's edge. Swamiji often describes this as that razor's edge, Somerset Maugham. Walking the razor's edge, Katti Munai Padai, as Swamiji was translated in the Tamil version of Yoga step by step. He wanted a Tamil version, we only got module 1 done, 13 lessons. And even that impacted so many people. When you want to walk that path, you have to adhere to the path. Adhere to the path. Adherence to the path towards Brahman is Brahmacharya. Stickability to that path, steadfastness in that path is Brahmacharya. And what does Maharishi Patanjali tell us? When you abide in the Brahman, abide in me. What a beautiful song we used to sing in school. I remember that. Abide in me. Beautiful one. When we abide in that Brahman, what happens? Virya labha. Brahmacharya pratishtayam virya labha. Again pratishta, sacred space. When you are in the sacred space, when you are in the sacred space of Brahman itself, by adhering to the Brahman, of course, at that moment you become a Brahmin. A Brahmin is one who abides and has understood the highest Brahman itself. Later on it became by birth. The Vedic system was never a birth-based Varna system. By quality, by nature, you become a Brahmin. When you understand that Brahman, by adhering, that is where Brahmacharya is the pathway towards Brahman. And the more you adhere to that pathway, the more your journey will be a journey of strength, courage, endurance, virya labha. Because to walk this path, you have to be a hero. The spiritual path is not a path for the weak. It is not a path for those who are caught up in the mundane world. The spiritual path needs us to be a tivra samvegin. That is what we need to be. The tivra samvegin needs to have that quality of virya. Shraddha, virya, smriti, samadhi, prajna, purvaka itaresha. We need that capacity to have stickability to that path. Stick to the path towards Brahman. That stickability will give you courage, endurance, strength, vigor. But if you are caught up in the mundane world and you keep on trying to create more and more, what happens is you are wasting your energies. Conservation of energy is Brahmacharya. Conservation of energy is Brahmacharya. Because what is Brahman? Ultimately all is energy. You are learning to conserve energy because energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can be wasted. You can waste energy. We do a lot of that on this planet today. Energy needs to be conserved. The law of conservation of momentum and energy. What we are doing is we are conserving the energy so that the lower energy, which is called the oja, gets transformed, transmutated and sublimated into what is called teja. And at that point we become a tejasvin. That is why the path of adhering to Brahman, Brahmacharya, becomes a pathway for the attainment of virya, and through the sublimation of the oja into the teja, we become a tejasvin. Which is what the mantra says. Sahana bhavatu sahana bhunaktu sahaviryam karvavahai tejasvi. That is what we want to be. We want to be the tejasvin. One who has tejas. The luminosity of sattva coming alive when the tamasika oja becomes the sattvika teja. In our sapta dhatus, rasa, rakta, mamsa, meda, majja, asti and shukra, this whole pathway, whatever you put in, goes through a pathway. The sapta dhatu, the 7 constituent elements that make us who we are. When you eat food, it goes through the rasa, rakta, mamsa. It goes into the meda, the adipose tissue. It goes into the asti, the bone. And from that it goes into the majja, the bone marrow, and then finally into the hormonal secretions of the shukra. And then this becomes what we call oja. And it takes about 5 days for each of these. So 35 days. Everything you put into you, 35 days a minimum to become oja. And then what do we do with that oja? You go around, have sex every place, waste all your fluids, and ultimately what happens? You have no strength, no virya. Because what has happened is everything you have taken in, all the nourishment you have taken in, physical nourishment through food, sensory nourishment through the senses, mental nourishment through whatever you have thought, all of that has got digested, come into oja. Minimum of 35 to 40 days. Yes, Nero. And what happens? That oja is then sent out by going and having casual sex. And then you say, I don't have energy. Can those hormonal secretions, can those reproductive secretions be transmutated and transformed into Teja? That is why Swamiji has given the 3 holy mudras: Vajroli, Sahajoli and Amaroli. These 3 mudras, they are practiced in the Hatha tradition in a very masochistic manner. But what we are doing is that we are transforming, transmutating, so that these secretions can become the essence of life itself. And yes, Acharya Birjuji, Virya in immune system, very true. We are wasting our energies and we become energy depleted. We deplete our energies and then our immune function goes down, and every Tom and Dick and Harry and coronavirus will infect us. Because what has happened? We have become immune depleted, immune suppressed, immune compromised. What has happened is all of that has come down, and then every smallest of viruses can attack and kill us. We need that Virya. We need that Oja to get manifest into Teja and become the Tejaswin. And the Vajroli, Sahajoli, Amaroli mudras of Swamiji's teachings, where we work on ourselves. We work on ourselves so that you move into what is called yogic family planning. You use all your creative energies as they are meant to be used. The right useness, the appropriate use of the energies that have been given to us, so that they are utilized as they are meant to be utilized. They are not disused, they are not abused, they are not misused. The right useness of the creative impulses, the creative energies that we have been blessed with, that is what Brahmacharya is. And when you move from duality to non-duality, when you move from multiplicity to oneness, from the many to the one, you grow in strength and courage, because now you are Brahman itself. If you are Brahman itself, where is fear? Because you are the supreme Virya. That is why when we talk of Virya, when we talk of Tejas, we talk of Lord Hanuman, Anjaneya. Anjaneya Swami. And today is a Saturday very special for Anjaneya Swami. He is that supreme Brahmachari. He is that supreme Brahmachari who has that Virya, the Tejas, and all the Ashtasiddhis and Navanidhis. That is the type of commitment. And what was Hanuman's commitment? Rama, 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 Rama. And because of that Taraka mantra, Rama, he moves from mortality to Amara, Mara, immortality. From mortality, which is Mara, he moves to Rama, which is the immortality, the Taraka mantra. From Mrityorma Amrutangamaya. That is the type of energy, and this is why when Bhishmacharya was given the name Bhishma for his vow of celibacy and Brahmacharya, he was given the capacity to choose the moment he would leave his life. Though he was shot down by Arjuna hiding behind Shikandi in the Mahabharata, because Bhishma had refused to fight Shikandi. Shikandi was used as a shield, but the arrows were of Arjuna. And then Bhishma says, give me a bed of arrows befitting a warrior, and a bed is created by Arjuna. What a beautiful concept. What a beautiful concept is brought out. He could choose the moment he could leave the body. That is the type of supreme mastery that has come through the adherence, the achara, to the path of Brahma itself. Chara achara. Charya, you are moving forward. You know, when Oja, and thank you Mauli for that. You know, the Ojas normally is the subtlest aspect of the Saptadhatu. So you go through the Saptadhatu from Rasa, finally Shukra, and it is going subtler and subtler. From Shukra, it actually becomes Oja, which is the subtlest aspect of the Saptadhatu. But compared to Teja, Oja is still tamasic. It is like when Maharishi Patanjali talks of Dharana Dhyana Samadhi. He says these are Trayamantarangam Purvebhyaha. Trayamantarangam Purvebhyaha. He says Dharana Dhyana Samadhi Samyama is Antaranga compared to the previous limbs. But he said even these become Bahirangam compared to Nirbijasya. Because Nirbija Samadhi, when it comes to Nirbija Samadhi, even Dharana Dhyana Samadhi, which were Antaranga, become Bahiranga. This is how we understand it. What is happening? That which was Sattva can become Tamas when compared to the higher Sattva. It is like, when you are amongst fools, you are very intelligent. When you are amongst fools, you are very intelligent. But then when you go amongst the wise, you may be the fool. And they talk about being, in that concept of, being the king frog in the small well. And then you go into the big well and you are not the king frog anymore. You are the clown frog. This is all relative. And that is why the Sapta Dhatus, you come into that subtlest aspect of Oja. And then that has to go even further. And yes, Acharya ji, all energies are tamasic and they have to become sattva. And even that sattva has to be transcended into nirguna. Because Brahman is nirguna. Nirguna para Brahma swarupa. Nirguna para Brahma swarupa. Gama gama Buddha prapancharahita. What a beautiful composition. Bhom Shambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho. Bhom Shambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho. Because Parabrahman is Nirguna. Kaivalya is a state where Pratiprasava has happened and the gunas have gone back. But till then, the job is Gunavritti. Nirodhacha. The job is Gunavritti Nirodhacha. But ultimately, when our Sattva Purushayor Shuddhi Samye Kaivalyam, that purity of ours has become such a state, you go into the state of Nirguna. What an amazing state. That is the Parabrahman. And the Vedas remind us, that Brahman is not somebody else. It's not someplace else. Aham Brahmasmi. Mukho kahan toonde re bande. Main to tere paas nahi. That divinity is within us. We are the divine with amnesia. We are the divine with amnesia and we have forgotten who we are. Brahmacharya is the pathway. When we adhere to this pathway, we attune ourselves to the creative energies of the source itself. Everything that has come out of that Brahman. We move from Asat to Sat. We move from Tamas to Jyoti. We move from Mrit to Amrit. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Hari Om Tatsad. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Dhanyavadaha Shukriya. Thank you so much for being with me. When you are with me, well, the universe says, Ananda, today this will flow through you for the sake of those who are watching. Because you are watching, I am able to share as a vehicle for the teachings of the cosmos. These are not my teachings. These are teachings of the universe. And I offer myself at the feet of that Brahman. May we all manifest that highest Brahman in our life. Thank you so much.